I guess we can go. We can.
Alrighty, recording in progress, everyone.
Fantastic. Hi, everyone. My name is Bobby Joe Smith III. I go by he, him pronouns. And my lovely co-fellow here is,
Hi, I'm Nat Decker. I use they, them pronouns, and I am an artist and designer, access worker, and very grateful to be collaborating with Bobby Joe on this 2023 Processing Foundation Fellowship that's called Sketching Access. And I also wanted to just quickly draw attention to the font that says Sketching Access. Oh, we went ahead.
I'll go
Just
back.
really, just this font is the letters are taken from the 504 sit-in protest posters, and it's a font made by Emily Sarah, who's a really fantastic artist and designer, disabled artist and designer. And then, we wanted to ground our conversation in calling for a free Palestine, expressing our solidarity with people in Palestine who are experiencing violent genocide by the Israel state, want to express solidarity for all oppressed people, but in this moment, just want to take any opportunity to really vehemently, repeatedly call for a ceasefire. And then this one is me. Okay, so just wanted to talk a little bit about the initial proposal for our project, which, our project we titled Sketching Access, and Bobby Joe and I had been working collaboratively with P5, having conversations about accessibility and the platform. And so part of our proposal was to complete revisions to the P5JS access statement that we were working on at the Open Source Arts Contributors Conference earlier this year. Also proposed creating an access resource library, and then proposed an access fellowship structuring, which we'll speak more about in the slides to come. And then we had also proposed a plan for facilitating the 2023 P5JS Access Day. I'm going to go to the next one.
As is often the case in working in projects that are open source and involve multiple people or through collaboration, things shift and change as to what those priorities are. One of the things that we really wanted to kind of keep intact, though, regardless of what pieces we started to actually build out and what seemed feasible, was a particular type of feedback loop that would allow for us, for processing in P5JS, as well as the people who are engaged with it, to state what their values are around the community and how they want people to be able to access it. And then be able to find ways to figure out, like, how does it really apply to how people engage with processing in P5JS? How do we reinforce those values through those connections and interactions? And how do we continue to grow and restate and refigure out and really reflect what it is that we need in our communities? And from there, go back and reshape the access statement. That way, making it a living document, not something that is just posted once and tucked away someplace, but something that keeps coming up and guides us in how we move and interact. So we really kind of borrowed from some of the language that we have learned in computer programming around the concept of this iterative value statement, something that is able to shift and change based on the current needs of the community. And that is something that is never done. It's something that continues to be worked on. So even the access statement that Nat and I worked on was not the first version of the access statement, but a new iteration. People coming together and taking a look at what the previous access statement was and figuring out, how do we need to update this? How has this served us? What pieces serve us and what pieces maybe don't serve us as well anymore? And then the concept of a feedback loop where things come back around and are constantly impacting each other and creating these changes throughout. So going back and changing the access statement changes how we should behave, how we should interact with one another, changes what resources we need to be looking at. And all of those things flow back in again to figuring out what the new access statement is. So this is kind of the framework, regardless of what we put in and out, we wanted to try to keep this structure of iteration and feedback.
So I was going to talk a little bit about process, because there was this reality that you know, we were very grateful to receive this fellowship, and then you know, Bobby, Joe, and I had to learn how to collaborate with the organization, collaborate with each other, and then also, you know, just live in our own unique realities and circumstance capacities. So you know, I think we had to keep like coming back to a concept of, I know for me personally, as a disabled person, of crip time, and which describes the unique ways disabled, chronically or neurodivergent people experience time and space. So just our need sometimes to like allow this project to like take the time it needed and have slowness. And I think another theme, like in this moment when there is a lot of feeling of urgency and urgency of action because of, you know, a number of things happening in the world, in our lives, like really like kind of navigating that friction between like needing to take our time and have some slowness around our process, and then the feeling of the urgency of our work and the urgency for the need of organizing. And we were also just like, you know, have like we had a lot of just like conversations about what this project was, what our like conceptual framings around access were, what we wanted to do. And that was like shifting around a lot. And that's like something we've had to accept as like part of the process. And I think we learned a lot about like these different collaborative tools we wanted to use, such as like Obsidian, and we were working in GitHub as well. Some of them are listed there. And then, yeah, just like trying to be a little, you know, like have some resistance to like the pressures of productivity, and staying like really grounded in the meaningfulness of us like engaging in deep research and taking our time and learning about each other and learning about what we want to do as collaborators.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the really valuable things about um, everyone who's really set up this fellowship. It's felt like there was space for us to be able to work through some of these things. I always felt like we were supported and we were given space to show up in our full humanity. Um, and I think that was really important for Nat and I, who have wanted to work with each other for some time, to be able to get this space and really figure out, okay, we're bringing different, maybe different perspectives of what we think around access, about how we want to engage with processing and P5JS community, how we want to engage with fellowships and our own artistic practices, as well as like what are some of the competencies that we want to learn through this. So there was a lot of growth, I think, and I'm just really grateful that we're able to have that time together. One of the things that I really enjoyed being able to work on and think through, not just for setting how processing in P5JS might be thinking about access and accessibility, but how I think about it within my own artistic practice and within the movements that I engage with, was looking at the P5 access statement and going through some of the revisions that were proposed by the group that was working on it at OSAC. So there was a whole team, there was a great number of people who came together and had discussions about what should access look like within the processing and P5JS community. What things do we feel like we can uphold? And how should we state like what our commitment is to community? And for me personally, that was something that drew me to P5JS and processing, was initially is like how it voiced itself, how it made itself seem more available to people than maybe some of the other documentation or other tech or code-based communities. So I felt a little bit of a responsibility to try to continue to uphold that feeling of welcome that I first received when I came upon processing in P5JS. So we went through every single one of the comments that people had made in terms of the first statement that we had put together, things that we felt needed resolved, things that we felt like needed new wording, wasn't quite there, maybe some research that needed to be added, and took time and really discussed those comments together. The new version that Nat and I had put together after absorbing all those comments and having our own discussions and rewording things is currently being reviewed by some of the core contributors and OSAC attendees as Processing in P5JS looks to make all of their documentation more accessible and figure out how they want to state their community values as well as their access statement together. So we will be working with Temi to finalize access statement and support revisions to the community statement and then the access statement as well. So we're really excited to continue that conversation and seeing how it all comes together.
And then part of the project too, we were able to put together this resource library that is very, very much a work in progress. And it is on GitHub right now, but we're not sure if that is, you know, the only place or the right place. But I've been doing research into accessibility for the last few years and have, you know, just encountered a lot of people that have created their own great tool sets, strategies, resource lists. And so I was just like really wanting the opportunity to like deepen my research into the subject, really take time to like read some books. I wanted to like just engage with more these like peers and figures working in the like accessibility area, like engage more deeply with their work. And so I was able to just compile a lot of resources that's on this GitHub. It's like such a puzzle to learn how to organize information like that. And you know, something we've been in conversation about and will continue to be as this is a work in progress is just how, like, what the best way to steward that information is, and then also like how we can make that information as accessible as possible. And I know we have some goals of like being able to have these resources and information available in multiple formats to promote accessibility. But yeah, this is like big puzzle, but fun research, have this GitHub, we need to do a lot more work on it.
Yeah. Yeah, wanting to use that same platform that a lot of the documentation already exists for people who are contributing to processing in P5JS and seeing what's possible as like a publishing space, right? In GitHub, where so much of this online open source contribution sort of happens. But there may be limitations there that, you know, maybe don't allow for the type of accessibility that we're thinking about in ways we want people to engage with this amazing resource library that really Nat has put together. We also, as part of that feedback loop, we were really interested in people being able to take the learning that was a part of that resource library and people who are interested in learning more about accessibility and how to apply it to their own arts practice, as well as people who are actively contributing to processing in P5JS or working for processing in P5JS, to be able to come together and have these deeper discussions. That was one of the things that kind of came up when we were working on the revisions for the access statement, is we realized there's so many movements that are involved in some of the language that we're using. There's so much context, there's so much background, and the concept even of accessibility means so much in the realm of art, of computational programming, that we felt like it needs time to really for us to go through and discuss and pull apart. So we wanted to be able to have some sort of reading group or some sort of workshop. We're calling kind of like the Sketching Access Working Group, where people who are interested in this and can actually impact the infrastructure of processing in P5JS or even some of the protocols that are used in that space can actually go and make changes based on the discussions that we have. And it's also a way for us to prop up the amazing resource library that we're continuing to build, add to it as we have discussions and realize, oh, we really need more information in this space. What are some resources that can help bolster our understanding? So we put together a proposal for a workshop that is the first workshop series would be looking simply at what does it mean to make accessible documentation. There's been a commitment by the processing in P5JS that any additions that are made to the code base and to the libraries that are available are focusing around access. So how do we give people the resources and the framework to be able to go and contribute in that particular way? So we put together a proposal along with certain learning objectives, you know, who we like in the space, and we'll see if that can be able to be funded or not with the grant money that they received. Move on to the next one.
And then part of, that was also in response to that there wasn't, and this was just like the need to be flexible, which is an important, like, tenet of accessibility, but like being flexible with like what the goals were, what our project was over the course of our fellowship. Like there wasn't the capacity from P5 to do a 2023 access day. And we had a lot of discussions about like, what does it mean to like propose a new fellowship, or how to, like, we just really wanting to bring people from multiple positionalities, expertise together to be able to build these like coalitionary conversations centered around the node of access. So that like kind of just became clear. It was like having, this model is what we landed on, of like a series of these working groups where we're providing some workshop tutorial, but then also opening up to like, okay, that, this is what we know, what can we do better? What can processing do better? What can P5 do better on this subject? What are ideas people have, just like that kind of lateral learning and collaboration. So hopefully that's something that will happen. And then,
Since we're at about
Oh yeah.
we're also about 15 minutes, so we'll just maybe do a quick shout out to Liam Baum, one of our Processing Foundation fellows, who was willing to have a conversation with us and looking at their particular project that they were working on and thinking through with us, what does it mean to do this project and think about have accessibility at its core. And so we just really appreciated that discussion, that Liam taking us up on our offer to do that type of consultation. And yeah, I'll run to the next slide. So
yeah, I mean, I know, and we are at time, but these are just some key points, some of what came up repeatedly in our conversations. And it was a lot like, resistance to a culture of compliance, thinking about these expansive cultural, coalitionary, intersectional workings of the type of access organizing we want to do, access versus assimilation as well. Thinking about like nothing about us without us, an important slogan that has roots in disability rights movement, also like specifically South African disability rights movement, tracing the lineages of these concepts, a lot of conceptual framing. But yeah, we had some great conversations, and I'm grateful for that container.
so many great conversations, and I think that kind of leads a little bit to the futures. In speaking with our mentor Kemi, and speaking with Sige, and speaking with Q, who have all been really helpful in not only fielding where we're at in our processing fellowship, but also thinking about what does this fellowship mean moving forward, and what is our relationship with processing in P5JS. Futures is something that is like a really big part of this. We really don't see the work that we have started and all this work that we've kind of put in towards the foundation being where it ends. We kind of see this continued engagement with the processing P5JS community and with each other. So some of the futures things that we're looking to continue to work on is converting the resources that we currently already have in the library into multiple formats to increase accessibility. So for some people, maybe they're neurodivergent, whatever it is, maybe just reading the text isn't the best way to process information. Maybe it's more valuable for them to hear it. So can we provide audio recordings? For example, are all the documents available and ready to be accessed through screen readers or other assistive devices? Thinking about what are different ways that people can get this information and be a part of the discussion without sort of like pigeonholing them in one format. We want to continue to design and facilitate small workshops on different accessibility topics using resources from the resource library. So one of the things that was like very much from the beginning with Nat and I is that when we're thinking about accessibility, we're not just thinking about compliance. We're not just thinking about the basic things that maybe are like design related or tech related, but also understanding how accessibility relates to the movements that we are a part of. And therefore, what are some of the topics that generally don't get discussed when people are thinking about how do I make my work more accessible? By kind of coming up with this little workshop series, we're able to kind of focus on topics that we think are important around thinking about accessibility, but also how it relates specifically to processing in P5JS, to making code art, to being a part of an open source community. How do we take these principles and really, how does it apply to what we do on a day in and day out basis. So we feel like the workshop is a really great space for that to happen, and having these sort of smaller modules might be a way that people can work with them more accessibly and building kind of like a pedagogy around them. And then Nat and I have just mentioned, like, you know, I've learned through this, and hopefully it feels the same way. It feels the same way that, I just want to share more space with Nat and to learn more about each other and just grow as friends, artists. I mean, that you can go through a project together and definitely not feel that way at the end. But I certainly feel like I have so much to learn from Nat. And that bond and that connection that we've made is something we want to continue to grow. And we want to continue to nurture a relationship with processing, P5JS, and all of the amazing folks that we've met thus far, all our cohort mates, all of our mentors. This is a community that we're committed to in very much this way. We're working on some of the infrastructure that's there and some of the culture that's there. So thank you everybody. Thank you Processing Foundation, Kemi, CKIQ, Saber, Sonia, and the rest of the Processing Foundation, the rest of our cohort, and everyone we learned from our research.
And thank you, Bobby Joe.
Yeah, of course.
So grateful to meet you. I'm sorry we went over.
You are good. And we can transition right into Stephanie. Thanks, y'all.
Working on that currently. All right, can you see it properly? Okay. So hey everyone, I'm Stephanie Jones, and during this presentation, I'll be discussing this topic, but also this project, which I've entitled Black Life in the Age of AI. And so I am a scholar of race, technology, and learning. And this is one area of my research. And overall, I really ask questions about what does it mean to sustain Black life. And so one of the big aims of this project was speaking towards Black life amidst narratives of Black death. And so how am I thinking about Black life? And I think of Black life as the everyday experiences of Black folks as we work towards survival and thriving in this world. This includes many topics like how we feel joy, how we use our agency, how we build community, and even how we experience pain. And so it's really not a definition, it's a vibe. So that means this is not meant to be like a monolithic description of what Black people are experiencing in this world, and acknowledging that it varies person to person. So Black life is going to differ in terms of class, gender, sexuality, ethnicity, and so many other factors. And it's very personal to each person. But there are also threads that connect us in terms of culture, food, song, music, and other elements of diasporic community. And so you might be wondering, like, how does this show up in the AI space? And so here are just a few headlines from various news articles that I'll read out for you and talk a little bit about how they're implicated in these different ideas. So AI technology guzzles water enough to fill 22,500 Olympic-sized pools. And so when we think about environmental racism, often it impacts those who are most marginalized and who have historically been redlined, and whose communities are near sites such as power plants, nuclear waste, etc. And so AI is kind of contributing to this ongoing environmental racism issue. Black artists say AI shows bias, with algorithms erasing their history. And so AI art is a really popular topic right now. People are like so excited about the generative power, but we also have seen how it generates and replicates racism. So if you search for a prisoner, an image of a prisoner in a generative AI system, the majority of the images will be of Black people. And so what does it mean that the word prisoner is associated with capturing and enslaving, in modern terms, Black people? Google's own algorithms have mistakenly tagged Black people as gorillas. This is just an example of like derogatory stereotypes being used on one of the most prominent search engines that people use every day. So you tell people to go to Google, and this is supposed to be a trustworthy source of information, but it's replicating harm. Facial recognition technology jail demand for days. His lawsuit joins others from Black plaintiffs. So since facial recognition technology has been in place, Black folks have been more likely to be misidentified due to the data sets. And as such, we see them being falsely arrested, held in jail, and things like this. And as we know, jail is a site of Black death. People die in cells, they're denied healthcare. And so there's really large risks to deploying these systems all over the country. Instagram users worry a new sensitivity filter is centering their work. And so in this current moment, we see how Instagram is deploying censorship and aiming to decrease conversations around the Palestinian experience, and how they are trying to advocate for themselves, but even that is being suppressed. And so there are people of all backgrounds in Palestine, and it's important to note this as well. And so it's not just a problem in the US, it's a global and societal problem. In addition to this, exclusive OpenAI used Kenyan workers on less than $2 per hour to make ChatGPT less toxic. And so when they had to develop this system, they pay people not even minimum wage standards in the US, while it's a US-based company rather. And then they expose them to harmful ideas and ideologies to train these data sets rather than equitably paying people or distributing the work. And it's unclear about what kinds of supports that these workers then have after this, if any, for any mental and emotional damage that would happen while you're looking at these kind of heinous things that AI is generating. And so you might be also wondering, like, what is AI? We've been mentioning this a lot. So AI stands for artificial intelligence, and it's the branch of computer science involved with the design of computers for other programmed mechanical devices, which have the capacity to imitate human intelligence and thought. However, what's been in question is which people are deserving of being called human, and therefore being represented, whose intelligence matters to be represented in these systems. And so the standards of artificial intelligence are often written by cis heterosexual white men. What does that mean for the replication of ideologies? What does that mean for the decisions about whose intelligence is valued? And what has that historically meant for who gets to be considered human and whose rights are prioritized? And so this project, Black Life in the Age of AI, is really exploring how does artificial intelligence as part of a broader socio-technical system affect Black life? And so I've been thinking about this across many dimensions. Materially, AI systems affect decisions on loans, getting money to people in real time. Physically, AI affects decisions on access to healthcare, whether you can get your prescription, whether you can see your doctor, whether you'll be approved for whatever procedure. It also influences surveillance and policing, as I just mentioned. Socially, algorithms are influencing what media we have access to. How are you suppressing Black voices? How are you influencing their reach? And then also mentally, as there are various narratives about how specifically the US is falling behind in this quote unquote AI race, but also in terms of who has access to AI education. It's often determined by different socioeconomic and factors, which are linked with or correlated with race in terms of school districts and how they distribute access to education on topics such as this. And so some of my goals for this project were to create a resource for parties who are interested in these intersections of Black life and AI, and to provide multiple entry points, whether these were research articles, news articles, podcasts, video lectures, interviews, or art. And so this project is threefold. The first part is the syllabus, which is currently live. And then there's two other portions, which are meditations on AI, which are 30 to 45-minute interviews, talking to different Black AI researchers and technologists, thinking about different questions. And the third portion was a art gallery, and both the meditation on AI and art gallery are accepting submissions. So if you would be interested in participating in one of these interviews or creating art around one of these topics, please do check out the website. And so this syllabus, just to get a bit more into it, covers a variety of topics, such as you saw before, what is AI, how AI is influencing the internet, race and AI, multiple categories on this, and some of the aims of technology education, because it's not just happening in a vacuum. People are also being trained to create these kinds of technologies and kind of thinking about what does that mean. Surveillance and policing is a large topic. Disability and technology, labor, gender and sexuality, and its environmental impacts. And so this is to say that Black life shows up in AI at all these in a variety of dimensions. And so we have to be thinking about this as we're designing projects, as we're deciding to be users of these technologies, and think about like what are the steps we're taking to question the information that these algorithms provide, but also why are we helping fill them out? Like, what does it mean to add data to algorithms, and that could potentially then be used to further suppress or harm you? So these are the kinds of questions that I'm hoping people will continue to ask as they are interfacing with these technologies. So just to give an example of one section of the syllabus, surveillance and policing, AI has been used for many things, and one of its largest applications is the surveillance of communities. Surveillance in the US is tied to histories of slavery and trying to track who the government decided was free. Our modern technological systems are built on this history, and these systems are not without errors and have led to the false arrest of Black folks. And so within this section, I wanted to pick this one in particular because it shows like the variety of resources that I tried to highlight on the website. There's books, there's a documentary. So Dark Matters on the Surveillance of Blackness by Simone Browne offers an excellent history on surveillance at large. But if you want to understand like how is surveillance implicated in AI systems better, this documentary, Coded Bias, offers a digestible insight. So like my mom was looking at my syllabus and she was like, I'm going to watch this documentary. And she said, now I can tell people about your work. Go watch the documentary. So even having that initial insight has come out of this work. There, I linked to like a website which shows how police face recognition is unregulated and how people are always like back on the lineup essentially, and how it's affecting communities of color, and as well as like several other research articles. And so the point of the syllabus is not to like read every single thing that's on there, but to pick and choose what's of interest to you and consider what's accessible to you, whether that's spending 5 minutes skimming an article, whether that's listening to a podcast on your commute, just finding different entryways to get engaged with the topic, and really be a part of developing this technology. And so a bit about the process. So I began with ideation and then lots of discussions with my mentor, Naima. And from there, I began collating resources, trying to figure out like what's the best And that's where I got into a lot of reading, watching, and listening, trying to figure out like what's a quick read, what's a long read, and kind of balancing that. From there, I assembled the syllabi and I developed the website. And then I put out a call for interviews in art. And so far, I've hosted 3 different of these interviews, which I've entitled Meditations on AI. And these episodes are coming soon. The recordings are done. I'm just working on like getting the transcription so that if audio isn't accessible, that you also have a visual way to interact with that media. And so some of the next steps are publishing those meditations on AI. And as I mentioned earlier, there's time. There's always time for more meditations on AI. So if you would like to be interviewed, hit me up. And there's also a call for art submission. So we haven't had any of those yet, but I'll be really excited to see what people will potentially be interested in submitting. And so I don't have too much more to say. Just overall, thank you to the Processing Foundation for the opportunity to create this project that I kind of thought up and was like, it will be cool, but is it possible? And I was able to find out that it is possible. And so also thank you to the 2023 cohort, my mentor, and the Meditations on AI participants thus far.
Woo! That's amazing.
We did it!
Yeah.
Round of applause for us.
Uh-huh.
Amazing, Stephanie.
Wow. Great job, Stephanie.
Amazing. I'm gonna try not to pipe in too much because I'm gonna cut myself out of this part, but feel free to transition to just a conversation to close us out. But thank you all. Thanks, y'all.
So now we just talk with each other. Okay. I was gonna say, one of the things I really love about your project, Stephanie, is the way in which you're organizing the content too. Like, what are the different ways and access points that are available? You know, a lot of times I'm just like, I just don't have the energy right now for an article, but I could sit and watch a documentary or something, or like, this is the way I need to hear this information. So the thoughtfulness around accessibility as you're putting together this incredible archive, I just want to commend you on that. I think that was really exciting to see.
Yes, I'm inspired by it. Because it is hard. It's like you can have so many resources together and figuring out how to just like be able to get like the most useful, but also a dynamic pool of different resources to percolate to the top and put those together. But yeah, you did such a good job. I'm like really excited to see the website.
Right. And so one of the things I also noticed was like you all have like your list of different links. At the bottom of the site as well, I have links to other people's syllabuses that are like relevant. And so it's like I think you all as well are not trying to position yourselves as like the quote unquote experts on this topic, but as people who are part of this community and are trying to educate and get involved in how we can like create more advocacy around these different topics.
Yeah. And how do we just like keep growing that web? It's like such a network of people working in similar subjects. And then I think there's also like a unique like intersection too with like what is relevant to people working within creative code. And that was like, that felt like an opportunity too, where it's like, okay, I can like really look at what are some of the projects specific to like past fellowships at processing, specific to the like contributor community, and just like really trying to learn and like collect links to all the different projects that related in that way. But also just like it was useful for me to just frame the research I've been doing on access with creative code in mind. And I'm sure like, yeah, like AI, it has that crossover too, but there's just a lot out there. But I'm, very impressed by your organization, and I'm inspired to add like some viewable material too, like some documentaries and things. And I think that was an idea we had too of like, should we produce some kind of video tutorial? Should we like try and have some of this like written material recorded in our voice so that is like available? But you know, our little resource vault is just where it is.
Yeah, I
It's a
think
work in progress.
that's part of the thought about the iterative nature. And you kind of mentioned this also, Stephanie, of like, you know, this is just a start. There's so much room for more meditations in this space, and linking out to what you said, relevant syllabi, so that people can maybe find a different path through the content that is useful and valuable to them. Nat and I have talked about, yeah, like how do you lead people through these conversations? How do you put things next to each other so that people can really like navigate and access what's there? But it's an ongoing and continuing conversation, and I think there's something really interesting. I like that we both were able to speak, show our presentations today, because I feel like there's a lot of resonance and overlap. I started off with processing in P5.js, and still one of my primary interactions with it is as an artist who does use code, and who uses the tools that are in processing in P5.js to make my work. To be able to start stewarding a tool in a community in some way that I interact with on a regular basis as an artist is a very different way for me to think about my practice and think about the projects that I'm working on. And also, what type of conversations do I want to have with this community that sometimes can feel pretty abstract, you know, because it is open source and people are, you know, when you put something online, it's like, who comes to it? But I see that active care and that active labor that you put into like how you put the resources together, who you invite in to have conversations with, and that sense of stewardship that's there. And I think it's a really fun and interesting and growing part of my practice. And it was really cool to see how you put yours together.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I appreciated about like both of our work is how we're trying to speak to different movements that are going on around the world, and how technology has implications in liberation and justice. And how even in choosing to like make your website accessible, you're kind of making a stance about how you might treat other people. And so encouraging people to get involved in whichever ways they can. Like each entry point can lead you deeper. Learning more can lead you deeper. How can you participate in things like mutual aid? How can you collaborate on projects like Urals?
There's a politics to the archive, right? I think Nat and you and I had a conversation about this earlier, like really at the very beginning, how like during the pandemic, for example, I remember seeing a lot of like Google Drives being passed around with materials about, learning about the Black experience in the US, because that was, another part where we're seeing Black death happening after George Floyd was, murdered extrajudicially. But wanting people to educate about themselves about what's happening. And there's something really powerful about having that archive and having those resources there. And then there were also things that were kind of inaccessible about them. And that was just a bunch of links or a bunch of docs or PDFs kind of in one large folder. So how you lay that out and how you even present those pieces, how you put them together, there's a politics to all that. And some of those lines those edits that are made can either make things accessible or not. I think you talking about your mother, for example, is a really great way of like, because you provided a video source, your mother now feels like, I can say more about what you do. Like, this was the way that I needed to engage with this content and information. If you didn't include that, that is a part of the politics of that archive, and who is able to have access to it and who is able to see themselves represented or be able to participate. So yeah, I think that is something that was like top of mind. And certainly as we continue, Nat and I continue to iterate through what this resource library looks like, we are considering, is GitHub the right place? Is this particular place that's meant for coding and meant for distribution, is that the right place for how we want people to make, have access to this content and information? Does it allow us to design it in the way that we want to? Does it allow us to have the type of media that we want to have on there? Is it accessible across different types of technological devices, and depending on what your relationship is to tech infrastructure, whether you have good access to the internet or not, or you mainly have a cell phone as your computational device versus a laptop or computer. All those things are decisions that kind of can be made, and can be a lot to have to think through at the very beginning. And so having this iterative approach, I think, is also really important. It's certainly for Nat and I, but it sounds like you're kind of also approaching it the same way.
Yeah, and it's like we're all kind of approaching these conceptual ideas around access, and thinking about that, it's like the ability to access with a screen reader is no more important than your mom being able to find a resonant form of media. And it's all these same same struggles, same efforts, and I'm really just excited about looking at that overlap, thinking about how accessibility, especially in tech world, will kind of become about access to being able to be marketed to about marketability, or it becomes about yeah, just kind of very tied into the area of commerce. And then also it's importantly accessibility coded with disability, but it's that is a there's an important history, lineage, and community there of accessibility specifically, meaning for the needs of disabled community. But beyond that, there's just so much overlap. There's so much also history of how we have framed disability in the US as it overlaps with historical Black experience in the US. There's just a lot of overlap there. And I think just trying to kind of challenge the in maybe a tech privileged area of what accessibility means, being very connected to the dominantly white men, disability rights movement, and just wanting to, yeah, just it's same struggle, trying to just find ways we can find nodes in which to connect our work. And yeah, so I'm super excited about the overlaps. I think your project's amazing. I'm really excited you're also working with art. I'm curious if you yourself are an artist, if you're making art about AI, if yeah, I've been thinking a lot the last month or so about the role of the artist in this kind of movement work. But yeah, I'm curious about that.
So I'm a art hobbyist, a maker or crafter, I would say. I like to start little projects, and I have an art room full of my many little projects in various stages of completion. And so I've really gotten into needle felting recently. And I don't know if you've been to the Philadelphia airport recently, but there's an art installation using crochet or knitting that has different glitched images of what's his name? I think it's the MySpace guy. And then an Internet Explorer logo, and just kind of it's a installation that gets you thinking about the internet when you walk by. And so really I've been thinking about and I'm a PhD student, and so I'm trying to develop this dissertation, and I have this hope, and inshallah I get to have this art exhibition featuring other Black computing professionals developing art tied to Black life. And so I've been thinking about how could I use needle felting to create different things that inspire people, and try not to stab myself in the process. How about y'all? Have y'all made any different art around your topic lately?
I'm just still stuck, like I want to know what needle felting is better, and I'm really excited. And I think there's like such an interesting crossover I'm thinking of like history of computing and being this like feminized labor and like that lineage, and then like the way that like, yeah, like craft arts gets like subjugated in this gendered way. There's like maybe some interesting connection there, but yeah, that sounds so fun and relaxing, and I think I should try and work on something that is not on a screen and with my hands. That sounds calming, but I don't know. I think it's like I have not been to my studio or had a lot of space the last month for my art practice, and I feel okay about that. I'm gonna come back to it. It's like the life journey.
I was gonna say, I think within the last month, I've actually started using AI more in my artistic practice. So I consider myself a media artist, and like video, photo, computation, and increasingly textile and like performance are a big part of how I make. And not necessarily because of a resistance to AI, but certainly feeling like when I take on a tool, a lot of times they weren't developed with me in mind. And there's a sense of like needing to be a little bit cautious about how it's used. I think I'm really excited to look at your website, because maybe this is a great framework for me to think about as I continue to start really like diving into AI and maybe thinking about how does it apply to my practice. But for example, thinking of the applications that AI can have in helping with language revitalization within my tribe. Is there a way that we can use AI, chat GPT, natural language processing to help, revitalize our language and have these different tools, so you don't have to necessarily speak to somebody who is fluent, which are becoming less and less people within my community, to be able to have that continued interaction. But then thinking about who owns that data, what is the politics around data sovereignty, because you can get AI to speak Lakota in a certain way, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be spoken in the same way that our elders are still contain the same values that were embedded with the language and sort of some of the speakers who grew up with it. So even just learning the syntax doesn't mean that you understand the values that are embedded in that language. So I think there's always, for me, been this process of like, I know Black people, a lot of marginalized people, but I think about Black people in particular, have been early adopters to a lot of technology and have continuously taken tools and reformatted it for our own use in ways that make sense for us, even if they haven't been built for us. So I think there's a big part of how we've learned to like navigate this space and navigate maybe tools that aren't meant for us. And so I think working on, sketching access with Nat, for me, I don't really want to separate that as a thought of like, this is my arts practice versus this is me working with. This is me taking a tool and working and realizing that it's not just a tool, it's not just a code base. There's a platform there, and there's a community behind it, and there are people who are stewarding it. So part of using that tool means engaging to me with that community and being sure I can help shape it in a way that people can see themselves with that tool and think through, what does it mean for me to use this? So I see that resource that you have, that you just built through the Processing Fellowship, is also part of that. I know there's a number of people, and there are Black people right now who are working with AI, who are want to be able to think through, what does it mean for me to be using this tool that is becoming more ubiquitous in our life? How has it and how might it continue to be used in maybe ways that don't serve us or actually invite Black death or violence in our community? So it's like never as easy as just like, oh, here's a new technology. I feel like there's always this little bit of hesitancy and always this little bit of adaptation. And certainly I think there's overlap within the disability community too, where it's like constantly the built environment is not made for them. So the innovation that happens to just try to navigate the built environment is, there's a lot to be learned in from that daily continued interaction. So I don't know if that really answered your question, but that's what maybe thinking about like what AI means in my work and how I consider myself as an artist and what it means to be working on these tools with processing and whatnot.
I think that was a really good wrap up for our conversation. So thanks so much for spending time with me this evening.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Nat Sige. So yeah, and really, yeah, I just thank you so much. It really means so much, all the work that you all put in.
Yeah, Stephanie, really, really honored to be sharing space with you. And it's so excited to check out your website and keep following your work. But thank you, everyone.
Have a great evening.
Amazing. You can stop the recording, Sonia. Thank you. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
All right, have a
Thank
great
you for
evening.
making that so